The wind slid across the valley like a quiet whip-red dust, clinging to the torn hem of Lena's dress as she stepped toward the weathered gate of Lone Cedar Ranch. Evening shadows thickened the far ridges like dull knives pressed against the sky's edge. Lena carried a sagging cloth bag, a slim notebook hidden in the lining, and a weary determination that still refused to break. She stopped beneath the faded sign, inhaled the scent of dry grass and rusted iron, then knocked twice against the gatepost. Inside, hooves clattered against wood cowbells jingled life of the ranch, carrying on indifferent to whoever now stood at its threshold. A man emerged from the barn's shade, tall and broad as a doorway, gray eyes steady and unflinching. His hat was pulled low, jaw shadowed by rough stubble, a scar etched across his right wrist. Someone called his name from the distance. Cal. Cal did not speak at once. His gaze drifted over the bruises at her wrists, the way she tilted slightly to hide her left side, and the silence around her, drawn tight like reins, holding back every word she might say. Lena's voice was rough from the road. "I can sleep in the barn. Just give me work." Cal studied the split seams of her shoes, the dust at her heels, then answered slowly. "No one sleeps with the horses here. But if you can withstand our mornings, you'll have the small room behind the kitchen. Mabel, get bandages and warm water." His tone was flat, not harsh, not soft. A simple command in an ordinary day, except the one obeying it now trembled like a reed. Mabel, a silver-haired woman with her bun tied neat, led Lena into the kitchen. Warmth from the cast-iron stove wrapped her like a clean blanket. Mabel boiled water, muttering how any girl walking half the plains without gloves was bound to lose them. Lena said her gloves had fallen crossing a rock bed. She'd chosen to keep the notebook instead. Mabel noticed the way Lena clutched at her dress, lining the grip of someone terrified of being robbed. She asked no more, simply set down a basin, a jar of salve, and told her to clean, dab, and bind. Through the window, Lena glimpsed Cal herding two restless colts. No shouts, no whip, only silent control. His will moving ahead of the reins. That night, Mabel spread a thin blanket on a narrow bed in the little room behind the kitchen. Lena lay on her side, listening to insects hum, chains rattle wind brush against the tin roof. She closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. Each time darkness folded, she saw a white lamp burning, too bright. A lock clicking once, then again, a man's ritual before he turned away. Her hand reached under her dress. Lining touched the notebook pressed flat against her ribs. Numbers, sketches, names, the map of her escape, the reason she still breathed. She whispered a name into the dark, not for herself, not for Cal, but for a courthouse built of stone, where every door weighed heavy and every promise had hooks. At first light, Lena rose before the roosters. Cold mist slid under her collar. She stoked the coals in the stove-boiled coffee, swept ashes, stacked pans. Mabel entered, eyebrows raised at the readiness of it all. She gave Lena flour, ordered her to knead, roll, cut, and bake. By the time the bread was browned and steaming, ranch hands filed in boots caked with mud, shoulders steeped in honest sweat. Some stared, some smirked. Cal came last, hat low as always, but his glance lingered on the fresh bandages at her hand, a flicker of cold approval. After breakfast, Jackson, the wiry foreman, handed her a pitchfork and gloves. "Start at stall 3. The black horse's mean. Don't reach in until it's looked at you 3 full breaths." Lena nodded. She learned the rhythm of the stalls, the musk of straw and damp wood, the beat of her heart in time with hooves. The black stood half-back, eyes bright and suspicious. Lena didn't rush. She cleaned the neighbor stall first, letting it watch, murmuring softly about long roads and fleeing numbers. Only as the sky bled wine at dusk did the black step forward, ears flicked, letting her call it by a name not its own. That night, Cal lingered on the porch, jotting in his small leather book while Jackson reported. The black let her stand half a length away. Cal answered with a single word. "Good." He closed the book, circled past the barn, paused at the small kitchen window where Lena's shadow bent over her bed. He did not knock. He walked on the way a man accustomed to waiting moves at the pace of storms. The third day, the wind shifted, rain's smell stirring in the grass. Jackson set her to mend a sagging fence line. Lena hauled hammer, nails, wire. Pain bit under the bandage, but she did not falter. When the wire coil slipped, a low whistle rose behind her. Cal picked it up, set it back in her palm. "Don't ruin your hands for pride. His voice carried no mockery, just a plain order like telling her to brace another post. She snapped that her hands were her own. He stared long enough for her answer to shrink. On this ranch, he said, your hands are ours too. Later, Mabel left a pair of sturdy gloves near the bandage tin. Lena ignored them. That night, she found them on her bed. She didn't ask when they'd been placed there. In the morning, she wore them as if the choice had always been hers. Rumor spread across the ranch like weeds. A stranger kneeling in a stall, whispering spells to a black horse. Some laughed, some frowned. Cal never spoke, but his notebook bore another short line, endures silent, meets the gaze. That night, rain broke heavy on the tin roof, lights flickered out. Mabel lit oil lamps. Jackson ran to the barn. A side door banged open, wind roaring in. Lena rushed with Cal to force it shut, palms cut raw beneath her gloves. Cal leaned close, voice low in her ear. Count 3, pull together. They braced, slammed the bolt home, then slumped against the wall, gasping. He saw blood seeping, opened his kit, told her sit. His hands were warm and steady, not grasping, not timid, just sure. After the storm night sank thick, frogs chorused in the marsh rain, dripping like beads from the eaves. Lena sat under the porch roof, notebook, open, scribbling names. Transfers, maps, the skeleton of a secret. When she looked up, Cal was at the steps, hands in pockets, eyes fixed on the horizon. He did not ask about the book. He only said, tomorrow you'll ride with Jackson to the North Stream. Men sometimes dump poison in water. His voice carried like wind over stone. Lena nodded, knowing he never spoke idly. That night she slept deeper, not in peace, but without sudden jolts. She dreamed of a river gate and a figure standing like a marker post, not threatening, not moving. When she placed an invisible thing into his empty palm, the dream brightened and rain thinned to silk. Morning fog clung low across the pasture, curling around the posts like pale smoke. Lena rode beside Jackson. The wiry foreman's hat pulled down against the damp. The mare she'd been given, named Willow, stepped carefully along the narrow trail leading north. Jackson chewed on a sprig of grass, eyeing her with that sideways skepticism he carried like a second skin. Cal says you're to check the stream with me, he muttered. Don't slow me down. Lena answered with silence, focusing on Willow's rhythm, the steady clop of hooves that felt steadier than her heartbeat. The further they rode, the denser the trees grew until the stream came into view. Usually clear now, clouded, tinged with a faint, unnatural sheen. Dead fish lay caught against stones, their silver bellies flashing in the dull light. Jackson cursed under his breath. Someone did this deliberate, he growled. Rain don't make water sour this fast. Lena dismounted, crouching at the bank. The stench bit her nostrils, acrid and chemical. Memories rushed in office door papers hidden under floorboards. A man's voice, low and cruel. You'll carry this secret for me, or you'll carry nothing at all. She pressed the thought back down, dipped a stick into the water, lifted it dripping, smelled the bitterness clinging to the bark. Jackson spat. Blackwood? Has to be. He's been circling Cal's land for years. Poison the herd, break the man. The name sliced through Lena like cold steel. Blackwood. She had run from it, crossed states to bury it. Yet here it rose again, mirrored in another man's vendetta. Back at the ranch, Cal listened, without speaking, eyes hooded as he turned the vial Jackson handed him. Finally, he said, we guard the herd tighter. Post shifts. Flush the troughs. His voice was steady, but the muscle along his jaw ticked. That evening, smoke curled from the chimney, Mabel bustling in the kitchen, ranch hands crowding the table. Lena served bread and stew, her hands sore but steady. Talk buzzed about the poison stream wagers, about how long before Blackwood showed his face. Cal sat at the head, silent, his presence enough to keep panic from spilling into fear. When the meal ended, Lena slipped outside. The stars were brittle bright, the kind that seemed to hum with cold. She leaned against the corral fence, notebook in hand, scribbling hurried notes, ingredients she recognized in the stench names of suppliers she remembered from ledgers once stolen from Blackwood's safe. Every page she filled was a blade pointed back at him. A sound behind her made her freeze. Cal stood near, hat in hand, watching her by lantern light. You're writing, he said, not a question. Lena stiffened, slipping the notebook behind her. Old habits. Habits worth keeping. She wanted to say no to deny, but his gaze held hers too firmly. These notes might matter one day, she admitted, to someone willing to stand against him. Cal's silence stretched long. Then he stepped closer, his shadow falling over hers. If he comes, this place stands with you. But you'll need more than courage. You'll need proof. I have proof, she whispered. Just not here. The words hung heavy. Cal studied her as though weighing whether to push further. Instead, he said, "Ride with me tomorrow. There's something you need to see." Sleep came late, broken by dreams. Footsteps echoing in long marble halls. A hand gripping her arm too tightly, promises disguised as threats. She woke to the sound of the rooster sweat dampening her temples. When dawn rose, Cal was already saddled Thunder, the black stallion snorting impatiently under his hand. "Keep up," he said. Lena mounted Willow and they rode east, across open land grass bending in the morning wind. After an hour, they reached the ridge where pines whispered in the breeze, a grove standing taller than the plains around it. Cal dismounted, motioned her forward. "This is where my father brought me after the war," he said quietly, "when silence was the only cure. It's where I decide what matters." Lena stood beside him, the valley stretching endless below. "And what matters now?" she asked. He looked at her, and the weight of his answer pressed harder than the silence of the pines. "That you're not running anymore." Before she could reply, a rumble of wheels rose from the trail. A carriage, black and polished, rolled toward the ranch gate. Cal's expression darkened. "Blackwood?" He said the name, low, final. Lena's breath caught. "He found me." No, Cal corrected, eyes narrowing as he turned toward the valley. "He found us." The carriage door opened and a man stepped out. Coat-tailored smile, sharp as broken glass. He called up toward the ridge, voice carrying across the land. "Emma Sawyer. My darling, you've led me a long chase." Lena's knees weakened, her notebook clutched so tight her fingers ached. Cal stepped in front of her body, a barrier as solid as the ridge itself. "Stay behind me," he said, voice calm but edged like drawn steel. The carriage rolled to a halt in a swirl of dust. Ranch hands paused their work, drawn by the commotion, some gripping pitchforks as if instinctively arming themselves. The man who stepped down carried himself with the arrogance of someone who never expected to be denied anything. Richard Blackwood's polished boots struck the earth like it belonged to him. His smile, broad for the watching crowd, never touched the cold calculation in his eyes. "Miss Sawyer," he said, pitching his voice with mock relief. "Emma." At last. Emma froze, her breath catching. The name wrapped around her throat like a rope. She wanted to spit it back at him, deny it, bury it again, but the truth of it cut too deep. Cal moved a step forward, shoulders squared. "You're trespassing," he said evenly. "Turn that carriage around." Blackwood's laugh was low, rehearsed. "And you must be Apache Morrison, the war hero who thought he could tame land and woman alike." "I've heard about you." "Leave," Cal repeated. "I can't do that." Blackwood's gaze slid past him, locking on Emma. "You've caused quite the scandal, my dear. Disappearing, leaving me to face questions. I've painted your absence as grief and stability. People believe me. They always do. But now," his eyes glinted, "now I can bring you home." Emma forced herself to speak, though her throat trembled. "I'm not yours. Not anymore. Not ever." The murmur among the ranch hands grew louder. Cal lifted one hand, quieting them, his focus never breaking from Blackwood. "She's here by her choice," Cal said, "and she stays if she chooses." Blackwood's smile thinned. "Choice? You filled her head with that nonsense. You don't know her the way I do. Fragile, unstable. She clings to strong hands. She'll see reason." Emma stepped forward despite Cal's protective stance, her voice carrying farther than she thought possible. "The only thing I clung to was survival. Every scar on my body, every nightmare in my sleep came from your reason." For the first time, the mask cracked, a flicker of rage quickly hidden. "Careful, darling," he said softly, venom laced beneath the sweetness. "You don't want these simple folk thinking you're hysterical." Cal's voice cut in like a blade. "Enough. Sheriff Cooper's a mile out. You'll deal with him if you keep this up." Blackwood's smirk returned, though tighter. "The law bends for men like me, Morrison. Money, power, connections. You think a few cow hands and a barn full of cattle can shield her?" "Try me," Cal said simply. The tension coiled so tight the air seemed ready to snap. A ranch hand's horse shifted nervously. A lantern flame inside the barn guttered in the wind. Even the cattle beyond the fence had gone silent. Blackwood finally tipped his hat mockingly. "For now," he said. "But this isn't over. Emma belongs with me. She always has." He climbed back into the carriage, the door snapping shut like a verdict. Wheels ground against the dirt, carrying him away, but the shadow he left behind seemed to cling heavier than before. The moment he was gone, voices erupted, ranch hands demanding to know what Blackwood meant, suspicion and loyalty wrestling in their eyes. Emma clutched her notebook, her secret proof of Blackwood's crimes. Cal placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her against the storm of questions. "Not here," he told the others. "Not now. We'll talk when I say." His authority silenced them, though. Unease rippled through the crowd. That night, the ranch gathered in the dining hall. Lamps cast golden halos, but the atmosphere was taut, fragile. Emma sat beside Cal, her hands shaking despite her effort to hide it. Finally, she opened her notebook, laying it on the table between them. "He'll keep coming," she said, her voice low. "He won't stop until he destroys me, unless I destroy him first." Cal studied the pages, records of transactions, coded notes, signatures that tied Blackwood to theft and fraud. Proof enough to wound, maybe to ruin. He closed the notebook gently, his hand covering hers. "Then we use this, not just to fight him off, to end it." Outside, the wind rose, rattling shutters. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, echoing the storm pressing down on them all. Emma lifted her eyes to Cal's. "Then we'd better be ready." He nodded once, solemn, certain. "We will be." The storm broke with more than rain. By morning, the ranch was buzzing with talk. Some hands sharpened their loyalty to Cal and Emma. Others whispered doubts poisoned by Blackwood's insinuations. Fear is a weapon, and Blackwood knew how to wield it. When Sheriff Cooper finally rode up the long drive, the ranch hands drifted from their chores, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Cooper dismounted, slow hat pulled low against the drizzle. His horse stamped nervously, as if sensing the tension. "Morning, Morrison," he called, voice carrying an edge. "Need a word with your new manager." Cal met him halfway, boots grinding into the mud. "Anything you've got to say, you can say in front of me." Cooper's gaze flicked past him to where Emma stood on the porch, pale but unflinching. "Mr. Blackwood filed charges," Cooper said. "Theft of family property. Claims she took heirlooms when she disappeared. Says he's got papers and witnesses to prove it." Murmurs rippled through the gathered ranch hands. Cal's jaw tightened. "Witnesses he paid for," he said flatly. Cooper lifted a placating hand. "Not my call, Cal. I've got orders to bring her in for questioning. Won't keep her long. Just procedure." Emma's stomach knotted, memories of locked doors and cold threats clawing at her chest. Cal shifted, placing himself squarely between her and the sheriff. "She's not going anywhere alone," he said. "If she talks with me there." Cooper's eyes narrowed. "That's not how it works." "Then it doesn't work at all." Cal's voice was low, steady, but the weight of it stilled the air. For a heartbeat, the sheriff seemed ready to push back. Then, perhaps remembering the war hero who had stared down worse than county politics, he exhaled sharply. "Fine. But if she bolts, it's my badge." In town, the courthouse loomed gray against the rain. Inside, Richard Blackwood waited, polished shoes gleaming on the wood floor. He rose when they entered, his smile perfectly crafted for the clerk and bystanders. "Darling," he murmured, as if they'd been parted lovers, reunited. Emma's skin crawled. Cal's presence at her side steadied her. But when Blackwood's eyes met his, the air crackled with unspoken challenge. The hearing was swift, designed for intimidation more than justice. Blackwood's attorney painted Emma as unstable, fragile. A woman who fled with valuables during a breakdown. They waved documents, falsified receipts, witness statements. Each word was calculated to shred her credibility. Emma gripped her notebook under the table. Every lie they told stoked the fire in her chest. When the judge finally allowed her to speak, she rose, legs trembling, but voice steady. "He calls me unstable," she said, staring at Richard. "He calls me fragile. But the truth is, I lived under his control for years. He isolated me. He locked me away. He left bruises he called lessons. And when I found proof of his crimes, he decided I wasn't fragile anymore. I was dangerous." The courtroom hushed. The judge leaned forward, interest peaked. Blackwood's mask faltered for a fraction of a second, rage flaring in his eyes. "You can smear me here," Emma continued, "but I have the truth, every page of it." She held up the notebook. "You can't bury that under lies." Murmurs spread through the benches. Even Cooper's arms crossed at the back of the room seemed less certain now. The judge ordered further review, postponing any arrest until evidence could be examined. Blackwood's jaw clenched as he gathered his papers. He leaned close as they passed, voice like poison. "Enjoy this reprieve, Emma. You've just made it worse for yourself, and for him." His gaze slid to Cal with lethal promise. Back at the ranch, the weight of the day pressed on everyone. The hands looked to Cal for guidance, their loyalty tested. Emma sat at the dining table notebook, open hands trembling over the pages. "He's going to keep coming," she whispered. "Every lie, every trick, until there's nothing left of me." Cal crouched beside her, eyes burning with resolve. "Then we fight him with what he fears most, the truth in daylight where everyone can see it. No more hiding." Emma met his gaze. "And if it destroys us," his hand covered hers, "then we burn standing together." Outside, thunder rolled again, echoing the storm of reckoning, drawing closer with every breath. Night fell heavy over whispering pines, the kind of darkness that pressed close and carried whispers of unease. The ranch was quieter than usual. Even the horses seemed restless, stamping hooves against their stalls as if sensing the tension. Cal walked the perimeter with a lantern, every creak of the wind sounding sharper than it should. Inside the main house, Emma sat by the fire notebook, open eyes burning from hours of writing. Each page held scars of memory turned into testimony. It was exhausting, but Cal's words echoed in her mind, the truth in daylight. Just as she dipped her pen again, a crack like gunfire split the night. The lamp on the mantel trembled. Then came the acrid scent of smoke. "Fire!" a ranch hand shouted from outside. Boots thundered across the yard. Emma bolted upright, rushing to the window. Orange light flared near the storage barn where hay was stacked high. Cal was already there shouting orders. "Bucket line from the well. Jackson, get the horses out." His voice cut through chaos, steady and commanding. Flames clawed at the night sky, devouring dry hay with ravenous speed. Emma ran outside, skirts catching ash. She grabbed a bucket without hesitation, joining the line. Water sloshed, hands blistered, but still they fought. Her lungs burned, smoke stinging her eyes. Every trip felt like trying to quench a wildfire with thimbles. Through the haze, she saw Cal at the front face, blackened with soot shoulders, straining as he pulled down flaming timbers to stop the spread. Every movement carried the weight of desperation. Then, as if mocking their effort, another shout rose from the opposite side of the ranch. "North fence downed cattle." Cal spun, disbelief flashing in his eyes. Sabotage. Two crises at once. Emma's heart pounded. "It's him," she whispered. "Blackwood." Cal didn't waste time arguing. "Emma, stay with the fire line. Keep them steady. I'll take Jackson and check the fence." "You can't fight this on two fronts," she cried. "I don't have a choice," he said, already mounting thunder. The night became a blur of chaos. Emma poured every ounce of strength into fighting the flames, shouting encouragement when ranch hands faltered. The barn walls groaned, threatening collapse. Just as exhaustion threatened to drop her to her knees, a final surge of water beat back the fire. Smoke hung thick, but the blaze was dying. Ash clung to her skin. Sweat soaked her dress, yet she refused to rest. Cal hadn't returned. Dread gnawed at her chest. When hoofbeats finally thundered back into the yard, relief and fear collided. Cal swung down from Thunderface Grim. The fence was cut. Cattle scattered. Lost at least a dozen head. Emma's stomach twisted. "He's not just trying to take me back. He's trying to ruin you. Ruin this place." Cal's eyes met hers, and for a moment the mask slipped, revealing raw fury. "He won't stop until we're ashes or dust." But he underestimated one thing. "What's that?" she asked, voice ragged. "That you're not his to break anymore." The words struck deep, steadying her. For years she'd been defined by fear of what Richard might do. Now she saw clearly fear was his leash. Cutting it was the only way forward. But as dawn crept over the smoldering ruins of the barn, the ranch hands gathered, faces tight with unease. Whispers spread about sabotage, about danger following Emma, about how much more they could endure. Jackson voiced what many thought. "Boss, we can't fight a man with Blackwood's money and power." "Maybe. It's better if she goes. For all our sakes." Silence fell heavy. Emma's throat tightened. Cal's gaze swept the group hard as steel. "Any man who thinks this ranch stands for surrender can ride out now. But if you stay, you stand with her same as me." No one moved. Loyalty battled fear in every eye. Emma stepped forward, voice hoarse but firm. "If I leave, he wins. Not just over me, over all of us. He'll prove fear rules stronger than truth. I won't give him that. But I won't drag you down either. The choice is yours." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mabel Flower, still smudged on her apron, planted herself beside Emma. "She stays. Any man says otherwise can eat cold biscuits and find another roof." Laughter broke the tension, ragged but real. One by one, the ranch hands nodded. The decision was made. Still, as Emma collapsed into exhausted sleep hours later, she knew the fight had only sharpened. Blackwood was escalating, and the next strike would cut even deeper. The morning after the fire brought no peace. The sky was pale and brittle, as though the land itself braced for another blow. The ranch yard bore scars of the night before, blackened timbers, scorched earth smoke still lingering in the air. Emma's body ached from exhaustion, but her mind churned with something sharper determination. Cal met her at the porch steps, jaw-set, eyes shadowed. He held a folded telegram, the kind of message that rarely carried good news. "From Carter," he said, handing it over. Emma unfolded it, hands trembling. The words hit like a hammer. Preliminary hearing advanced to 2 days. Blackwood pushing fast. "Must appear." 2 days, Emma's voice cracked. "He's tightening the noose." "Then we tighten ours," Cal replied. His voice was calm, but beneath it thrummed barely contained rage. "We'll bring everything we have." The next 48 hours blurred into relentless preparation. Carter arrived at Whispering Pines with stacks of documents and questions that cut deep. Emma sat at the dining table, reliving each fragment of her past. Dates, threats, bruises, locked doors, all laid bare under the lawyer's steady gaze. Each memory reopened wounds, but each word written made them hers again. Cal hovered near, not interfering, but always there when her hands shook too badly to hold a pen. The night before departure, the ranch gathered in the barn that still smelled of smoke and damp hay. Mabel passed out steaming mugs of coffee, while Jackson polished his boots with a soldier's precision. The silence was thick, everyone waiting for Cal to speak. He finally rose, his presence commanding the room. "Tomorrow we walk into a different kind of fight. No cattle, no fences, just lies against truth. Some of you think this doesn't concern you. But it does. If a man like Blackwood can destroy one of us, he can destroy all of us. So tomorrow we stand as one." Emma swallowed hard as every head turned toward her. Their faces lined with grit, and weather carried something she hadn't expected: trust. She felt it settle into her bones. Morning dawned cold and brittle. Emma dressed carefully, plain navy dress, her mother's small brooch at the collar. The silver ring Cal had given her, glinting softly. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Not the frightened girl who had stumbled onto the ranch, but someone forged in fire and storm. The courthouse loomed gray against the Montana sky. Inside, the air buzzed with reporters, townsfolk, and curious onlookers. Richard sat at the plaintiff's table, polished to perfection, his mask of concern firmly in place. But when his eyes met Emma's, a flicker of rage broke through, quick and sharp. Carter leaned close. "Remember, calm, steady. He'll try to provoke you." Emma nodded, clutching the journal she had filled with testimony. The weight of it steadied her. The hearing began with Richard's attorney painting him as a devoted fiancé, desperate to rescue a fragile woman from delusion. They spoke of doctors, of grief, of family heirlooms, stolen in weakness. Every word was poison, wrapped in silk. Emma's turn came. The bailiff swore her in. She gripped the stand with both hands, feeling the wood under her fingers anchor her. Carter's voice was steady. "Miss Sawyer, tell the court about your relationship with Mr. Blackwood." Her throat tightened, but she forced air into her lungs. "At first he was kind. After my father's death, he offered support. But kindness turned into control. He managed my accounts, restricted who I saw, tracked every move I made. When I resisted, he said I was unstable. When I argued, he locked me in our room." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Richard's mask didn't slip, but his knuckles whitened on the table. Carter guided her through dates, incidents, the photographs she'd hidden, the recordings she'd made of whispered threats. Each piece built a wall of truth, brick by brick. When the opposing attorney pressed, suggesting she'd imagined it, Emma kept her voice even. "I imagined the bruises on my arms, the locks on the doors, the fear of never leaving alive." Her eyes swept the room, daring anyone to deny it. Silence followed. Then came the moment no one expected. Carter called a surprise witness, Rebecca Collins, Richard's former assistant. She testified to seeing the same patterns, anger disguised as concerned threats whispered when no one else could hear. Richard's face paled, cracks in his facade widening. When the judge recessed for deliberation, Emma found Cal waiting in the hallway. His hands were blackened with soot from the fire still fresh on the ranch, but his eyes were clear. "You were stronger than I've ever seen," he murmured. Emma let out a shaky breath. "I thought I'd break, but I didn't." "Because you're not his anymore," Cal said. The gavel finally fell hours later. The judge's words cut through the tension like a blade. "Petition denied. And given testimony, I am ordering further investigation into Mr. Blackwood's conduct." Richard's mask shattered in that instant fury, twisting his face as cameras flashed. He rose, leaning across the table, hissing low enough only Emma and Cal could hear. "This isn't finished. You'll regret this." Emma met his gaze unflinching. "No, Richard, you will." The victory was theirs, but as Emma stepped outside into the cool evening air, she felt the truth like a shadow at her back. Richard had lost this round, but men like him didn't retreat. They regrouped, and the next battle would demand even more than she'd already given. The courthouse victory carried them only a single night of peace. By morning, whispers had already spread through town. Richard Blackwood was furious, his pride gutted in public, and his fortune bleeding under the weight of investigations. Men like him didn't lick their wounds quietly, they struck back. Emma felt it the moment she stepped onto the ranch porch at dawn. The air was too still, the horizon too sharp. Cal stood at the edge of the yard, shoulders tight, his gaze fixed on a dust plume rising from the main road. A convoy of sleek black cars approached absurdly out of place against the Montana hills. "He's not wasting time," Cal muttered. The vehicles rolled to a stop just outside the gate. Richard stepped out first, no longer hiding behind polished smiles. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes burned with cold fury. Beside him, two men in dark coats scanned the ranch with calculated precision. Lawyers' bodyguards, Emma couldn't tell which. Darling Richard called, his voice sharp enough to slice the morning quiet. "You've embarrassed me once, but this ends today." Cal stepped forward, planting himself between Emma and the intruders. "You're trespassing, Blackwood." "Leave." Richard ignored him, fixing his gaze on Emma. "You belong with me. You've been manipulated, poisoned against me by this Cowboy. Come now and I'll forgive your little performance in court." Emma's heart pounded, but she forced steel into her voice. "I'm not yours, Richard. Not anymore. Not ever again." Something snapped behind his eyes. "Then you've chosen your side," he hissed. He raised a hand and one of his men opened the car trunk. Inside lay evidence bags. The very containers Cal had recovered the poisoned water that had nearly killed half their herd. Emma's stomach turned to ice. Richard had connections everywhere. He hadn't just tried to ruin them, he'd made sure they knew he could do it again. Cal's hand brushed her arm, grounding her. "Go inside," he murmured. But Emma didn't move. "No," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is my fight too." The standoff stretched brittle as glass. Then Sheriff Cooper's cruiser pulled up, gravel spraying as he braked hard. He stepped out, hand resting on his holster. "Blackwood, you were warned. Court's decision stands. You've no claim here." Richard's mask slipped fully this time, fury twisting his features. "You small-town fools think you've won something? I built empires while you shoveled manure. I will bury you in lawsuits, investigations, debts you can't pay. This ranch will rot and she'll crawl back to me when it does." Cal's voice was quiet, deadly. "Try it, see what happens." For a moment, no one breathed. Then with a cold smile, Richard signaled his men back to the cars. "Enjoy your little victory," he sneered. "I'll be back. And next time it won't be words." The convoy disappeared down the road, leaving silence in its wake. But it wasn't relief Emma felt. It was dread. That night she found Cal in his office, bent over maps and ledgers. The lamplight carved harsh shadows across his face. He looked up as she entered, his eyes softer than his expression. "He won't stop," Emma whispered. "I know," Cal admitted, "but neither will we." He pushed the ledger aside, pulling her into his arms. "We stand together, whatever storm he brings." Emma rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady drum of his heart. For the first time she believed it. Still, as thunder rumbled distantly across the plains, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's storm was already on its way. The storm arrived 2 nights later, not from the sky but from the ground. A restless wind rattled the shutters of the main house, while most of the ranch slept. Emma sat awake at her desk, candle burning low. Her journal open, though she hadn't written a word. Something gnawed at her chest, a warning she couldn't name. A sudden crack shattered the quiet. Not thunder gunfire. The sound tore through the night, followed by the panicked bawl of cattle. Emma shot to her feet, heart racing. Before she could move, Cal burst through the door, his revolver already in hand. "Stay here," he ordered. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Whatever's happening, I'm not hiding." He hesitated for the briefest moment, then nodded once. "Stay close to me." Together they rushed into the yard. Lanterns flared as ranch hands scrambled from their quarters, weapons drawn, shouting over the chaos. Shadows moved along the fence line, figures dressed in dark clothing, setting fire to hay bales and driving terrified cattle into frenzy. Richard's men, Cal growled. "Cowards hiding behind the dark." Emma gripped his arm. "They're trying to drive the herd into the canyon. If they succeed—" "I know," his jaw tightened. "Jackson round up a team, cut the herd off before they reach the ridge. Emma with me." They sprinted across the yard, dodging sparks and smoke. Flames licked up the wooden posts, casting the night in a hellish glow. Emma coughed, eyes watering, but refused to slow down. Cal moved like a man born for this moment, every gesture precise, every command carrying iron certainty. Near the barn, one of the intruders broke from the shadows, lunging at Emma with a length of chain. Instinct overrode fear. She ducked, grabbed a pitchfork from the wall, and swung with all her strength. The man staggered back, cursing, before Cal's revolver cracked, sending him fleeing into the dark. "You all right, Cal?" asked, eyes flashing with worry. Emma nodded, breathless. "I can fight." "I never doubted it," he said, pride threading through his urgency. They reached the corral just as another explosion rocked the ground. Someone had ignited the fuel shed. Flames roared skyward, heat searing their skin even at a distance. Horses screamed, thrashing against their stalls. "We have to free them," Emma gasped. Cal covered her as she flung open the stable doors, guiding the terrified animals into open pasture. Diablo bolted first, black mane whipping like smoke, but instead of fleeing, he circled back as if guarding her. Gunfire cracked again, closer this time. One of Richard's men appeared in the firelight, rifle raised directly at Cal. Without thinking, Emma hurled herself forward, slamming into the man's side. The shot went wide, splintering a fence post. Cal was on him in an instant, disarming him with brutal efficiency. "That's twice you've saved me tonight," Cal muttered, chest heaving. "We're even now," she managed, adrenaline surging through her veins. The chaos raged for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. Ranch hands fought back fiercely, forcing the intruders to retreat under the sheriff's approaching siren. By the time Cooper's deputies arrived, the ground was littered with smoke hoofprints and the wreckage of sabotage. But the worst revelation came as dawn broke. Dozens of cattle lay dead near the ridge, driven too hard too fast. The loss cut deep, financially devastating, but worse, a cruel message left in their broken bodies. Emma stood beside Cal as he surveyed the destruction. Soot streaked his face, his shirt torn, but his presence was unshaken. "This was Richard," Emma whispered, her voice raw. "He wanted us broken," Cal said quietly. "But we're still standing, and as long as we are, he hasn't won." Emma looked at him, then really looked and saw the weight he carried, the ranch, the men, her. But beneath it all, a fierce light burned unyielding. She slipped her hand into his, smudged with ash but steady. "He doesn't know me," she said. "He thinks fear will drive me back. But I'm not that woman anymore. Not with you." Cal squeezed her hand, gaze fixed on the rising sun. "Then we fight. Together. Until he has nothing left to throw at us." As the first light spilled across whispering pines, painting ruin and resilience, in equal measure Emma felt something shift. The battle wasn't over, but the choice was made. She would not run. Not again. The sun rose on a ranch bruised but unbroken. Smoke still drifted from the charred remains of the fuel shed, the acrid stench hanging heavy in the air. Ranch hands moved like ghosts through the wreckage, bearing the dead cattle. Repairing broken fences, whispering to one another about what would come next. The land bore scars, but the people bore resolve. Emma walked among them, bandaging blistered hands, carrying water, offering words of encouragement. For the first time, she felt like more than a survivor. She felt like part of the ranch itself, stitched into its bones. Yet beneath her calm exterior, a storm churned. She knew Richard wasn't finished. He had escalated once, and he would again. By midday, Sheriff Cooper returned, his face grim. "We arrested 3 of them," he told Cal on the porch. "Local drifters paid cash by a man who matches Blackwood's description. But no proof ties him directly." "Not yet." Proof or no proof he's behind this, Cal said, his voice low and dangerous. And he won't stop until he thinks he's won. Emma tightened her shawl around her shoulders. Then we make sure he never gets that chance. The sheriff shifted uneasily. He's already filed new petitions with the court. Claims Emma's unfit, accuses you of coercion, says you're keeping her here against her will. He's trying to drag the law into his corner. Emma felt the words like a physical blow, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. Let him try. I'll tell the truth. Cooper studied her, then nodded. You've got courage, Miss Sawyer. More than most. That night, the ranch gathered in the barn, lanterns glowing against weathered wood. Cal stood before them, his presence commanding, despite exhaustion. You all know what we're up against, he said. Blackwood isn't just a threat to me and Emma. He's a threat to Whispering Pines, to every man, woman, and animal here. He thinks he can bully or burn his way through us. But he's wrong. This ranch was built on sweat and sacrifice, and no outsider is going to take it from us. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jackson stepped forward, his rough voice carrying conviction. We stand with you, boss. With both of you. Emma's throat tightened. She'd spent months proving herself, fighting whispers and doubts. And now here they were offering loyalty not just to Cal, but to her. Later, when the barn emptied and silence returned, Cal found her near the Corral Diablo's dark shape looming protectively at her side. You look like you were born for that room, Cal said softly. I was terrified, Emma admitted. But then I realized he's only as strong as the fear he plants. The moment I stop watering it, it dies. Cal smiled faintly. You're stronger than even you know. Before she could answer, headlights swept across the yard. A sleek black car rolled to a stop at the ranch gate. Richard Blackwood stepped out, immaculate as ever, his arrogance radiating like oil on water. Evening, he called, voice smooth, almost cheerful. I thought it was time we had a civilized conversation. Cal moved instantly in front of Emma, his body a barrier. You're trespassing. Richard chuckled. Come now, Apache. No need for hostility. I only want what's mine. His eyes shifted to Emma, cold and possessive. Darling, you've had your fun, playing house on this dusty ranch, pretending you're someone you're not. But the games are over. You belong with me. Emma stepped forward before Cal could answer. Her voice shook, but only with fury. I don't belong to you, Richard. Not now, not ever again. For the first time, his smile faltered. Careful, he hissed. You think this man can protect you? I can crush him. I can ruin everything he's built. I already started. Cal's voice was calm, deadly calm. Try me. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sheriff Cooper's deputies arrived, headlights cutting through the dust. Richard straightened, mask slipping back into place. This isn't over, he said, his voice venom beneath the polish. I'll see you both in court. And when I'm done, you'll wish you'd never defied me. He turned, sliding back into his car, the engine growling as it disappeared into the night. Emma's knees buckled, but Cal caught her before she fell. She clung to him, her breath ragged. He won't stop. He'll keep coming until one of us is destroyed. Cal held her tighter, his jaw set with unshakable resolve. Then we make sure it's him. The night closed around them, thick with smoke and fear, but also with something fiercer, determination. The next battle wouldn't be fought with fire or fists, but in court in front of judges and reporters, where Richard's lies would finally meet the weight of the truth. Emma raised her head, eyes burning with new fire. Then let's finish this, once and for all. The courthouse loomed tall and cold against the Montana morning sky, its stone walls etched with decades of judgment and stories of power. Emma stood at the base of its steps, heart hammering in her chest, the pearl ring on her finger grounding her to the promise she'd made. Beside her, Cal's hand covered her, steady and strong. We walk in together, he said, voice low but certain. No matter what happens inside, you're not alone. The steps felt endless as they climbed, flashes from reporters' cameras bursting like lightning. Questions flew. Is it true you faked your disappearance? Miss Sawyer, Mr. Morrison, are you harboring a fugitive? What about the allegations of theft? But Emma kept her eyes forward, Cal's presence, her shield. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Richard sat at the plaintiff's table, immaculate as ever, in a tailored suit, his attorneys arranged like soldiers flanking a general. He turned as they entered, his smile polished for the crowd, but his eyes dripping venom. Emma met his gaze, refusing to flinch. For the first time, she didn't see the man who had caged her. She saw a desperate predator cornered by his own lies. The judge entered, her gavel echoing like thunder. This court is now in session. Blackwood versus Sawyer. Richard's lead attorney rose first, spinning a tale of fragile womanhood of a wealthy fiancé, abandoned in a moment of instability, of stolen heirlooms, and reputations tarnished. He spoke of Richard's unwavering devotion, his desire only to protect Emma from herself. Emma's stomach twisted, but she didn't look away. She gripped the edge of the table, breathing steadily. When Carter, their attorney, rose, the entire room shifted. His voice was calm, deliberate, every word a scalpel cutting through deception. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of mental instability. It is a case of calculated abuse and manipulation. Mr. Blackwood is not a savior. He is a predator. He placed Emma's leather-bound journal on the table. Inside are records kept by Miss Sawyer, documenting years of control, intimidation, and violence, corroborated by photographs, medical reports, and recordings. This is not a fragile woman. This is a survivor. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Richard's mask tightened, a crack forming beneath his practiced calm. Emma was called to the stand. Her legs trembled as she walked, but Cal's steady gaze anchored her. She raised her hand, swore the oath, and sat. Mrs. Sawyer, Carter began gently. Tell us why you left Mr. Blackwood. She swallowed hard, her voice soft but clear. Because if I stayed, he would have destroyed me. Not with fists alone, but with silence, with control, with lies that made me doubt my own mind. I left because I wanted to live. Richard's attorney tried to rattle her. Isn't it true you imagined much of this, that grief from your father's death clouded your perception? Emma's eyes flashed. Grief doesn't lock bedroom doors for 3 days. Grief doesn't siphon money from client accounts. Grief doesn't whisper threats into your ear and call them love. Richard did that. Not grief. Gasps filled the gallery. Even the judge's face softened slightly. Then came the turning point. Carter called Cal to the stand. Mr. Morrison, what is your role in Miss Sawyer's life? Her partner Cal said simply, his voice a deep rumble. In work, in truth, in whatever comes. I didn't rescue her. She rescued herself. I just gave her a place to stand. Richard sneered. You think this cowboy is your savior? He's using you for labor, for a spectacle. Once the dust settles, he'll toss you aside. Emma rose to her feet before the judge could intervene, her voice cutting through the room. No, you're wrong. Cal didn't cage me. He gave me freedom. He didn't silence me. He listened. And that's something you'll never understand. The judge's gavel struck once commanding order. I've heard enough. Her voice was firm, resonant. The petition is denied. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, this court recommends criminal proceedings against Mr. Blackwood for fraud, abuse, and attempted sabotage. Richard surged to his feet, face red with fury. You can't do this to me. I'm Richard Blackwood. I am... Finished, the judge interrupted, her gavel slamming down. Deputies closed in, restraining him as he shouted threats that rang hollow in the face of his unraveling empire. Silence fell heavy as Emma stepped down from the stand, every step lighter than the last. Cal met her, halfway pulling her into his arms as the gallery erupted with whispers and flashes. Outside, the sky broke open with sunlight after days of storm. Emma stood on the courthouse steps, her hand entwined with Cal's reporters, shouting questions she no longer feared. She turned to him, voice trembling but free. It's over, she whispered. No, Cal corrected gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. It's beginning. They returned to Whispering Pines that evening, the land scarred but alive just like them. Ranch hands greeted them with cheers. Mabel pressed a warm loaf of bread into Emma's hands, and Jackson muttered, knew the boss would never back down. As twilight painted the sky in golden violet, Cal led Emma to the grove of Whispering Pines. The wind moved through the needles, carrying secrets and promises. He drew her close, resting his forehead against hers. You came here asking to sleep in the barn, he said softly. Now I'm asking you to stay forever, to build a life with me, with this land, with all its scars and beauty. Emma's tears shimmered in the fading light. Yes, she breathed. Because here with you, I finally found home. The pines whispered their assent, a chorus of wind and memory as Cal kissed her beneath the vast Montana sky. And for the first time, the future stretched before them, not as something to fear, but as something to claim together.